Coming up, today's guest failed, and then he did one thing differently, and then he succeeded. I won't tell you what that one thing is, but if you catch this interview all the way through to the end, you'll know it for yourself, and it could have just as big an impact on your life. Also, notice the grin on today's guest when he tells you how he got a high-end developer shop to help him design the look, the feel, the features of his mobile app. You'll understand why he's grinning, and then I want to know from you, is it something that you'd want to do to get your product developed? Finally, how do you get strangers to tell you what to build for them and then to plunk down their credit cards and pay for it? All that and so much more is coming up. Before we get started, I want to congratulate Mixergy fan Brad Mills for creating this Nuvia Cafe. He says he did it while listening to Mixergy interviews based on what he learned from those interviews. Can you imagine the first time, by the way, that an idea that he had became this box of coffee or this cup of coffee that he could taste, that he could feel, that he could see out in the world? That's what Mixergy is about. Interviews for doers like Brad and you. By the way, if you want to check out his website, it's nuviacafe.com. That's where you can buy it. And this whole thing is sponsored by Scott Edward Walker of Walker Corporate Law. Do you need a lawyer who actually understands the startup world that you live in? Go to walkercorporatelaw.com. I've known Scott Edward Walker for years, so tell him you're a friend of mine. It's also sponsored by Shopify. Does anyone you know need a beautiful online store that increases sales and is easy to set up and manage? Send them to shopify.com. It's the platform that top online stores run on. All right, let's get started. Hey there, freedom fighters. My name is Andrew Warner. I'm the founder of Mixergy.com, home of the ambitious upstart. And after doing over 700 interviews with proven successful entrepreneurs here on Mixergy, there's one big observation that I made, and that is the people who want certain success, they do one thing, and I've been noticing it over and over in interviews. And that one thing is they find the pain. They talk to customers and they find the pain that's so painful, that's so serious that customers are willing to, in fact, they're eager to pay for a solution for it. And as you'll see in today's interview, not only are they willing to pay for it, they're willing to work with the founder to help build it. And then after it's built, they're eager to pay for it. And I'm so eager for you guys in the audience to see this, to see Find the Pain in action, that I want to diversify my interviews a little bit, to not just do interviews with mega hit companies, but I want to do today's interview so that you can see how a new entrepreneur finds the pain and how it leads to a turnaround for him. Sam Ovens is the founder you're about to meet. He is the founder of Snap Inspect, which makes software that allows property managers to inspect properties using their mobile phones. It even automatically creates beautiful inspection reports for them with one click. So, Sam, welcome.
Andrew?
You had, as I mentioned in the top of the interview, a setback before as an entrepreneur. How much money did you invest in this previous company?
All of my money. It was, I think, $10,000
How much
at the time.
time did you invest in that company?
A solid 12 months.
12 months, $10,000, all of your money. How much revenue did you get from that business?
Nothing.
Not a single customer?
Not a cent.
Not a cent.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked entrepreneurs about this before. Some are willing to be open, some are not. I think you are. Tell me about what happens when your money's going out the window and there's no revenue coming in. Like, what happens in your mind? What happens in your gut? What happens when you're asleep at night for 2 hours?
It's 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 terrible. Like it's it really is the only thing, on your mind when you're you look at your account balance and it just goes down and down every day, and there's nothing coming in, and there's no, you can't even see a way of how some revenue is going to come in. and you know the expenses just keep coming, and it's amazing how quickly you actually do run out of money. um, 10 grand went seriously quick. um, yeah,
I know
it
the feeling.
was.
Frankly, I remember actually in the early days of Mixergy when I was just tossing money out the window. I think it was all in $300,000 that I wasted going in the wrong direction with Mixergy. I was on vacation with Olivia in Europe, trying to enjoy the vacation in Europe, but all I could think about is I'm losing so much money. Where's my net worth going as a result of this? I mean, we would be out by the beach or out by in the sunny countryside, and all I would be thinking is, how much money am I losing? This is painful. You ever have that?
Yeah.
You can't enjoy things in life. Good food doesn't taste good anymore because you're so busy thinking. Did that happen to you, or am I imposing my vision on your experience?
Yeah, and I was cutting all my personal expense. So like, you know, taking my girlfriend out for dinner, like,
Uh,
you know, whereas that might only be $50, but you know, I wouldn't I wouldn't do that just so I could have money to spend in the company. And to think that, like, you know, how many dinners and stuff I was wasting, you know, and that's like your like human side of your life, you know, and it was even having an impact on that.
we're going to get to
Um,
this new business that you launched, which is the reason that I invited you here to Mixergy. We'll get to it in a moment, but when you were going through this, did you feel, you know what? I just don't have it. I'm not worthy of success. Or did you feel, hey, there's some greatness inside me that I just haven't figured out how to tap? Which was it? What were you feeling about your own sense of self and your own abilities?
so during before we actually launched it, and before we had a proper conversation with a customer.
I mean, yeah, the previous business that took 10,000 of your dollars.
Yeah. So before that, before we had any real experiences with a customer, I felt like I was incredible and that this idea was it. And then it all went backwards as soon as I talked to someone real. Um, and it just went down from there.
Oh, wow, I see. Once you talk to a customer, what was the
Yeah,
product?
it was a website, and it was pretty much the opposite of how job websites work. So um, instead of people applying for jobs, you would put a profile up and say what you're interested in, um, and then companies would search for you. Um, a typical sort of, like, you know, first business, um, that I have no idea how I came up with that idea, but
All right, I'm going to get back to exploring how you came up with that idea in a moment. Let's go back now to this new business, the one that you're running now. Um, Before you launched it, how many customers would you say that you talked to?
um,
Email, phone, etc.
okay, probably around 30 to 40.
30 to 40 versus the previous
Yeah,
business where you talked to none. Before
yeah,
you launched it, how much sales did you have?
about five and a bit thousand.
A little over $5,000 in sales from
Yeah,
customers who paid you or and committed to continuing to pay you once you launched.
yeah,
And this is before you even had a product for them to hold to say, okay, this is what we're paying for.
yes. And before I even knew how it was really going to work.
Okay. Are you a developer?
No.
No. Um, did you have a best friend who was a developer who was going to build this for you?
Um, no, but I'd sort of worked with the website before, which was nothing the same, but I had a little bit of experience.
Okay. A little bit of experience with web development, but not with mobile development, which is what it took to build this thing. All right. I want to find out how you went from where you were, a guy who spent $10,000 in a business that nobody, literally nobody paid to buy from, to where you are now, a guy with a business where you have over 5,000 in sales before you even launch, where you talk to customers, you understand what they want you to build, where you have, as I understand this, a dozen customers, a dozen spots sold before you even launch the business. And also maybe we can get into a little bit of how a guy who's not a developer could develop software. And I think that's also important. All right, let's go back and just step by step by step understand how you did this. You said something very flattering to our producer when he asked you, what's the first thing you said? You said, I wanted to reverse engineer. In fact, you tell it. The Groupon story. Why did Groupon factor into this? How did Groupon factor into this new mindset?
Well, that was how I found Mixergy. I was struggling with my first company, and I just couldn't work out how to get customers. And I thought that was supposed to be the easy part of business. So I remember Googling all sorts of things, and at the time, Groupon was a big hit. So I remember Googling, how did Groupon gain traction? And I think those precise words or something very close was in the transcript of your interview. So I came to Mixergy through that, watched that interview, and then from there, I guess I was hooked. That was my source of motivation, and yeah, that was my source of motivation. And the first time I actually started to think maybe I should learn from other successful people.
I remember that interview. Andrew Mason told me when I asked him how he got the first users for Groupon, he said, basically, I went up and down in the building where I worked, and I asked everybody to join this thing. And then from there, from that little niche, he grew Groupon to a deal site that covers the world right now. Before we continue with the steps, and we're going to go through very, very thoroughly, I think I'm going a little bit slowly in the intro, but it's important because I want people to see what you're able to do and what they, more importantly, can do once they understand this concept of talking to customers, of finding their pain, of getting them to buy. We're going to step by step them through how to do this. But what I'm curious about is, why didn't you think that sales was going to be tough? Why did you think, hey, I'm going to build this thing and sales will naturally happen? Why didn't you sweat the sales?
Well, I really had no idea back then. I thought the hard part, I thought the idea was everything. So I thought you've just got to have a new innovative idea where there's no competitors and you're the first. And I also thought that the development and getting the product built was the hard part. And once you'd done that, and once you had a product with an awesome logo and beautiful design and absolutely no bugs, then you launched and people just naturally thought it was amazing and would start using it.
I see. Because you thought the idea was so amazing, of course the world would want to buy from you. Other people needed to sell, but that's because they didn't have this revolution on their hands, this revolution in a business, right?
And their logo wasn't as good as mine.
And their logo wasn't as good as yours.
Yeah,
seriously.
That's what I used to tell myself.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it's typical mistakes of your first time businessman. I think I spent $300 and a good week sweating over the logo.
Wow,
ridiculous.
Yeah. You also think that, in fact, one of the people who you met through Mixergy is Dane Maxwell. You saw him in his interview look at entrepreneurship in a whole new way, and you said, I want that guy to be my mentor, right? And a lot of we'll get back to Dane in a moment, but a lot of what you're going to show us here came directly from Dane. This is the way that he shows you to talk to customers and figure out what they want and then build the business, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm writing a note here to come back and talk about Dane, but I'm realizing that I didn't get into the specific steps yet. And if I were in the audience, I'd go, Andrew, come on, tell me what to do already. Enough with this backstory. So let's go right into it. One of the first things you did was you wanted to find the right market. How did you find the right market?
So I think I thought the right market would have some money to spend. Well, first of all, they'd ideally business to business. So out of the consumer world into the business to business world.
Why business to business?
Pardon me?
why business to business? I'm trying to compare the way that you're going about this with the typical approach, and the typical approach might be, what do I use? What would I
Yeah.
want? What would my friends enjoy? What, it's that kind of thing. What would I want to see on everyone's iPhone as I go into school or as I go into work? But you were thinking, I want business. You have a whole other way of looking at what you're going to go after. So let's start with the business component of it. Why was going after business users more important to you than consumers?
Um, so, I'd been in the consumer world and with my previous company, and a customer a customer can really be anybody. Um, and because that customer can be anybody, how do you target them? You can't just call them. You can't you can't find their phone number on the internet, and you just certainly can't approach them and say something. And it's very hard to find them. But in the business to business world, um, most companies have their phone numbers listed, their physical address listed, um, even the every employee in their company listed, especially in real estate. Um, so you can just look at everyone and see the size of the deal, see exactly who the decision maker is going to be, see what their phone number is, their email, everything.
I see,
So
right. Now, you can,
yeah,
of course, go find consumers in the street. You can stand in the street, find consumers. Some of them will let you have a conversation with them and let you interview them and so on. But you don't just want a random person. You want to focus on a niche that you can really enthusiastically satisfy and then build and build from there. So you're right. If you want to focus on a niche, you can't find consumers as easily as you can find businesses. And with businesses, as we'll see, you're able to target much better. All right, so now you know businesses. How do you know which business to go into? Because frankly, when I first heard that you were going after, that you were creating inspection software, I said, inspection software? There's like a whole product for that? So how did you know that real estate would be the niche that you were going to target?
so so yeah, like I said, the first thing I decided was business to business. Then I wanted to find a niche that was, approachable on the phone or via email. So a niche where it was typical for people to list their details, and um, a niche that was big enough and had a little bit and had some money to spend in this type of economy.
How do you know
So
which niche has money to spend? How'd you figure that out?
Um, well, I don't know economically if this is correct, but what I did is I went to a job website, and I looked at, you can see number of jobs listed um, in each little industry, and I just looked at the ones with the biggest amount. I looked at the industries that were hiring the most,
Why?
because well, who's gonna be hiring, if they're broke?
I see. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a great indicator of success, of ability to spend. If they're hiring people, then it means that their business is going well. Beyond real estate, what else did you see?
Oh, like a lot of stuff.
Can you give
By
me one
this,
other one that we might
yeah.
not think
So
of?
you know, um, lawyers, accountants, heaps. This one, I remember just making a list of all of these different niches and putting them up on my wall. Um, and the only reason I chose property management, I guess, was I just felt like more comfortable approaching property managers compared to lawyers and accountants and stuff. I guess it was a confidence thing
I
back then.
see.
Mm.
All right, that makes sense. So let's go on then to the next step. So the reason that it's important for you to be able to approach these guys is because every part of this process basically is interacting with your future customer. So I understand now how you figured out real estate people. Let's get to how you figured out what product and how you got them to pay for it. What's the next step? After you knew that it was real estate people that you were going after, what do you do to figure out what to build for them?
Um, so so I can the strategy behind this is to find a business to business niche,
Mm-hmm.
that's contactable on the phone or via email, that lists their details and that have a burning problem, like a problem that, it's like they wake up, a tip, you want to find what a business owner, say, wakes up in the morning and, as soon as he opens his eyes, he goes inside his head, he just says, oh, like, fuck, I've got to go into work and do X. And all of this is to find out what X is. Um, and once you know what X is, that changes like everything. Especially if it's business to business and they've got some money to spend, and X, then you've got the foundations of a very good business.
All right. So,
But strategy sort of thing. So the actual tactic I used, I I Googled property managers, went through one by one and just found a person's name and their email and copy pasted it into Excel. And I got a list of 100, I think.
100. 100 names and email addresses of people in the real estate field. Did you focus on a specific city so that you can talk to them one-on-one, or did you say anywhere's fine?
I just focused on my home country,
Where are you, by the way?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. By the way,
Yeah.
thank you. You told me before we started that it's 3 a.m. where you are. I just have to thank you for going out of your way to do this interview with me. There's no way that you're going to get enough business from this interview for it to pay off. You've got a business to run. You're at a critical point in your business. And as an entrepreneur, you're still willing to step aside for a moment, wake up in the middle of the night. You literally went to sleep, you woke up, and then you're doing this interview so entrepreneurs in our audience can learn from your experience. I say this a lot in interviews, but I should be saying it even more because it means so much to me. The people who do interviews on Mixergy, just thank you for going out of your way for doing so much just to help the audience. All right, so you said, I'm only going to focus on property managers in New Zealand, in my home country, also in my home city too.
I, I think it's just a comfort and confidence thing.
But did you
Um,
also want him to be in your city so you can drive over and have a conversation one-on-one, or was that not
yeah,
important? You did.
yeah.
Okay.
So I did, most of them were in my city, but I did contact other people that weren't in my city. But most of that 100 were in my city. Yeah.
Okay. So you got 100 of them. Their email addresses are all in a list in Excel. What email did you send them?
Um, so I basically I remember that like the subject line was strange question. Um, and when one of those lands in your inbox, you just have to open it. And it it said basically like, hi, person's name, introduced myself. At that time I was still enrolled in university.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm basically doing some research on the property management um, industry, and I want to learn about the most painful problems that you have as a property manager. And I'm happy to share my findings with you at the end. Pretty short, and then just said Sam, and put a link to my LinkedIn profile to prove that it wasn't like a spam.
I see.
And I put my university name there too. Uh,
That's great.
yeah.
And you were in
So
university at the time?
I wasn't actually going to class, but I was enrolled.
Okay.
So it wasn't a lie, but
I see. All right, so
Mm,
basically you're saying I'm doing this research project. I'm trying to figure out what your biggest pain is, and if you tell me what it is, I'll show you my findings afterwards so you get to know what others in your industry are going through also. So there's an incentive for them to give you an answer. There's also the trust that comes from seeing that you're on LinkedIn and looking at your background and knowing that you're associated with college is also, I'm sure, helpful. All right, how many responses did you get back from the 100 emails that you sent out like that?
25.
25 strangers hit reply and told you about their pain.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a great
Um,
email, and I actually have it copied and pasted here from what you gave our producer. If anyone in the audience wants it, just ask for it in the comments, and Jeremy, I'm sure, will be able to send you what he sent me. So if you guys are looking for the actual email, let me know. All right, so 25 people responded to that email. What kind of answers did they give you?
Shitty ones. Um,
Really?
well, you get the surface problems, right? Through something like that, you always get the surface problems. So it's what's at the top of their mind, they write it in, hit enter. So, surface problems in that industry is arrears, which is making sure tenants pay their rent on time, or maintenance issues, which is, like someone left the tap running and now the house is flooded. You know, typical sort of surface problems, um, which was fine. And you've got to be. I remember trying to control myself to not jump at one of those surface problems and say this is going to be my
Why
my
not?
problem.
So this is something that I still don't understand. Why not hear that someone is telling you, you know what? I can't get enough people to pay their rent, or I've got another customer who's got a leaky sink. Why not jump on those and say, all right, I'll come up with software that handles leaky sink reports, or that makes it easy for them to find plumbers, or I'm going to come up with software that will just keep bugging renters until they pay. Why? Why are those surface problems, and why not solve them?
Um, so at that point, they were surface problems. And if I had just taken my findings from that email and run, like I wouldn't know the ins and outs of the problem, and I wouldn't know how serious it was, and what it meant to them, and how pain. I didn't have a deep enough understanding of how bad the problem was. Um, I hadn't heard someone almost be like in tears about about it.
I see.
Mm,
You know what? If you were to ask me right now, Andrew, what's your biggest problem? I would point to that piece of equipment that I left out, this lighting equipment that I left out there before the interview, and that would be my biggest frustration. But frankly, if you came back anytime after today and asked me what my biggest frustration, that wouldn't register at all. So I see what you mean. You want to know, is this an ongoing problem? Is this
yeah.
a frustration that they really care about, or do they only care passionately about it this second and then forget about it? Um, do you also want to know, is there a solution already for this problem out in the market, or is that not important to you?
Um.
And while you answer
So
that, I'm going to get rid of this thing.
cool. So yeah. So with arrears, right? That they already. This is the thing. They already have software in place to handle arrears, but still arrears keep happening because software can only do so much in terms of getting a tenant to pay their rent on time. It can't completely get rid of that problem. So they're already using software, and the software does a very good job, but there's still that piece of human error that they can't fix. So if I come into that niche, I'm just going to be another me too, and the real frustration that they're experiencing, they're still going to experience it with me too. So I'm not really solving a problem. I'm more just jumping in and doing what a lot of other dudes are doing.
I see.
Mm.
Okay. So you got 25 responses, a lot of surface answers in there. What do you do next with those 25 people?
So I replied back, um, and said basically, you sound like thanks for that. You sound like you know your industry very well. Um, I'd love to give you a call and chat to you a bit more on this. Um, can you let me know a time that suits? Uh, Sent it. Um, yeah, that was the second email.
Okay. And of the 25 people who you sent that second email to, how many responded and said, "Yeah, I'll help you out"?
This is just typical conversion stuff. It was 12, I think. Yeah, 12.
So 12 people. One of the reasons why I say that is I recently recorded a course for Mixergy Premium with Jason Evanosh of Kiss Metrics. His whole job is to make the kind of phone calls that you're talking about with potential customers for Kiss Metrics and with existing customers, so that they can figure out what to build for new customers, and of course how to improve the product for existing ones. And he told me that he had these doubts about his way of doing this, because I think the number that he got back was something like only 20% said yes, they would talk to him. He said, "What am I doing wrong? Do people not want this? Am I bothering people? Am I getting in their way?" And it wasn't until he talked to Heaton Shaw, the founder of Kissmetrics, that he understood this is pretty typical numbers. And that boosts your confidence as a person who's putting himself out there, who's potentially talking to customers. This was, by the way, well, anyway, this is fairly typical, and so I want the audience to hear that, so that if they duplicate what you're doing and they don't get 100% response, or maybe the first person they reach out to says no, they'll understand. Doesn't mean they're on the wrong track. All right, so 12 people responded back. They said yes, they wanted to have phone calls. What did you learn in the phone calls that you didn't learn in the emails?
So much. It's like I can't even tell you how much more I learned on the phone. Um, and it was, I guess, a lesson in just how humans behave too. Like when you're talking to someone on the phone and you're interested in, well, if you talk to anyone and you're interested in them and their problems and their life, and it's all about them, and you're not saying anything about yourself, people just open up, and they feel important. And some of these phone calls, which I thought would be like I thought the person on the other end couldn't wait to hang up on me. I thought that that's what was going to happen. Some of these calls ran over an hour in the middle of someone's working day. Um, so they just stopped what they were doing in the office and talked to a strange question email sender guy for over an hour, and just told me all of their problems, and with emotion too. Um, yeah,
You know
it
what?
was.
I know what the audience wants next is they want to hear what kind of questions do you ask, and they also want to know how you break down all this information that you're getting from so many people and make it into something useful, actionable, because it feels like you're going to get flooded with data. But I think it's important to break away from what they want for a moment and talk about what they're going to need, and that is the difficulty of making phone calls. You worked with Dane, and so did other people work with Dane, other new entrepreneurs, and you were all basically following this process that Dane Maxwell laid out for you guys of making potential phone calls. He told me that some people had challenges doing that.
Oh
Talk
yeah,
about what you saw your peers go through as they had to make phone calls.
myself too. Um, I knew what I had to do, and even after I had the email, even after like, um, you know, I could have called them first, but it was more a comfort thing to do the email first and then to get their approval to call them at this particular time. All of this stuff was procrastination, really, to avoid getting on the phone.
So you're
Um,
saying even the first email could have been, "I'm doing this research project. Can I call you about it and I'll give you the results afterwards?" That might have been even better.
or I could have just called them straight away without ever sending an email.
I see. So what's
Yeah.
going on in your head? What do you notice in your peers' heads as you're wrestling with whether to pick up the phone and call or do something else? What is it that you're thinking? What is it that you're experiencing? What are you feeling?
I'd say it's less what you're thinking and more the emotions that just run with a beginning sort of entrepreneur and having to talk to a potential customer. It's the fear of, it's the fear of rejection. Um, it's that feeling that's, and not so much in your consciousness, but like it's just a feeling of like being scared and trying to do everything to avoid that particular thing.
So I'm concerned that someone in the audience who hears that will hear you say feeling scared, will hear you say worried about being rejected, and they'll think to themselves, I'm not scared. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm risking everything. Of course I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of rejection. I know that you're going to get rejected more than you're going to do well. I know that even Babe Ruth didn't have 1,000 batting average and so on. And the reason that we don't identify with what you're saying is because that's not real to us. I think what's real to us are the rationalizations that we make. And if you express those rationalizations that you made or that you saw other people make, we'll start to see our own rationalization and say, oh, yeah, that's not really true. I don't really have to take out the garbage right now. I can make a phone call and take out the garbage tomorrow or leave the place stinky. Or I don't really have to clean up my office one more time. I do have to make this phone call, and cleaning up the office is a rationalization. So what's a big rationalization that you saw other entrepreneurs make?
Oh, the things beginning entrepreneurs will do to avoid the talking to a customer is insane. Um, Thinking they need a website, thinking they need an email with um, their domain name after the @ sign, thinking they need a signature at the end of their email, a business card just in case someone says, "Oh, can you come over?" The list goes on, and I see it every single day.
What's another one? You know what? You're right. I hadn't thought of the need for a domain and the email address or their own website. But now that you mentioned it, I'm starting to realize, yeah, of course, a lot of people have said that. And I could see other people feeling that the person they're calling wouldn't trust that they're real business because they don't have this. They might come across as a fraud. And what else? What other rationalizations are there? Is there
The biggest one, the product.
Tell me.
So, going back to my first business, I had a domain name, I had business cards, I had a brochure, I had a website, I had the entire product polished. It looked amazing, everything. I had literally everything you could have, the email signature, everything was there before I went and talked to the customer. And the truth is, and it's in my case, it's true. And honestly, I've noticed now that in every other successful business, this has happened in some shape or form too, is that they talk to the customer first before even having a domain. Nothing, no money spent. I used my Gmail account. I had no footer. I had literally nothing. When I made the calls, they were from my cell phone. I didn't even have a landline. Um, like, and most entrepreneurs just procrastinate about it's not going to look professional, and like you hear them say things like, well, what if someone wants to buy it and I don't have it? So I better build it first, just in case that happens.
So you did what just in case? Oh, I better build it just in case it happens.
What a terrible thing, right? Building something can cost tens of thousands and take a year or 6 months or whatever, just so you can make that sort of thing work in your mind. It's really screwed up. But and I seriously see that every day with new entrepreneurs.
And the reason that you see it every day with new entrepreneurs is because you have this peer group that Dane set up for you guys where you talk in, I guess it's Facebook group?
We use HipChat.
Oh, HipChat. So you're talking to other guys who are going through this. You're talking to Dane, and now through Mixergy, hopefully some people will contact you and get to know you. And if you have time, you'll be able to help them also and hear their issues. All right. So this is a big problem. I don't want to minimize it by moving on to the next set of questions. But well, I know it's a big problem because I've talked to Dane and I know how much time he has to spend on this when he talks to entrepreneurs. I always thought it would just be, hey, give somebody a system and they're ready to go. They can handle it. But in talking to him and talking to other entrepreneurs, I see that it is a big problem. So I'm not minimizing it. I just need to move on with the rest of this part of this interview. And hopefully we can find other people who can come on and do interviews here at Mixergy and talk about the mental side, the head part of being in business, of recognizing your own insecurities, accepting that they're insecurities, and then dealing with them instead of doing what we mostly do, which is we pretend it's not there and call ourselves, like we're too big. We pretend we're He-Man, and of course, we all have this stuff going on in our heads. All right, so
that was honestly my biggest breakthrough.
What was that?
Is realizing that not everything is logic. And that everything really is based on emotion and learning my own reasons why I was scared of things. And that's a whole nother story, but that was massive, more so than knowing the system. Yeah.
Knowing that even you, a person who's logical, a person who over your shoulder has got a board, it's not a whiteboard, but a bulletin board of some kind. So you like to think in an organized way. Even as organized as you are, you also are guided by your own emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so are CEOs of $1 million companies and everyone else in the world.
Yeah. That's a tough realization to have, but it's an important one. It's a tough one to get to have. It's tough to get to a point where you can open yourself up to that reality.
Yeah.
All right. So now you've got them on the phone. What questions are you asking them?
So, your strategy is basically to find out their biggest problem and also their most painful one, and make sure it's not just a one-off, and it's something that is going to constantly keep them up at night. And it's not just something they're experiencing next week. The tactics to achieve that, I find it very important to understand the strategy of something first, and then you can create infinite tactics below that. And so me telling the tactics now, people don't have to copy them precisely. It's more if they can understand the strategy, then they can come up with their own tactics. It's really important to not just be one of those people that is just focuses on tactics and follows that, because you have to adapt, especially on the phone. Like I remember people having a list of, say, 20 questions that could help get to this problem, and they'd ask the first question, and they'd get the start of a good conversation going, and they'd feel like they had to get to the next question, and they'd lose that depth that they were gaining just because they thought they had to get through the tactics. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yes. Yeah. I've seen bad interviewers do that, where they have to go through all 10 questions that they submitted to the guest beforehand, or else they feel like they're cheating the guest, and they also feel like they're not doing a thorough job. But here I can see how it's even more troubling, because you're after someone's serious pain. And if you're trying to get through your series of questions, and after the first one, they're basically crying, you don't want to interrupt that crying session. You want to let it unfold so that you can understand what's behind it, so that you can understand where they are. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got that right.
So what are the ways that you did it now that you've got this understanding down?
I ask questions like, walk me through, your typical sort of day. And they would tell me, and I would they'd say, I come into the office and then I do this and this and this. And I'd say, okay, and like, what part of that do you dread doing the most? And they'd say something, and usually after a couple of questions and maybe 10 10, 15 minutes in, you've got a list of, say, 4 problems. And then I found this extremely helpful, was to go, okay, so you told me that you, and I repeated back to them what they told me. And they, the feel, you can just hear it in their voice, like, holy shit, someone understands me. So I repeated them back, and, they were like, yes. And I was like, okay. And so I want you to seriously think about this. Out of those 4 things, what is the most painful one? If you had to pick one, what's the worst? And so after I'd found their problems, I made them rank them. And I don't personally think they'd ever thought about that. And that no one had, because they had to read, the phone was silent for 20 seconds or something, while they actually thought to themselves, what is like my biggest problem out of those 4? And then they told me, and it was, yeah, they told me. And that, to me, that sounded like I'd kind of hit something, because you could almost feel over the phone that they'd come to a realization too.
Suddenly like a business therapist.
Yeah.
So that also answers the second question that I had earlier, which is, when you have all of these frustrations and all of this data, how do you make sense of it? And the way you make sense of it is by having them all rank it so that you know what their top problem is. And then did you start to see a pattern emerge from that? Or was it still a collection of different problems that each person had something different from the next?
Yeah. So on first call, that was my first call, by the way, which was crazy. And that call wrapped up, and I jumped on another one, and it didn't come as easy, them saying it on their own, but it was one of their problems, and if I probed enough, that problem would come out. And I think it was only after 4 calls that I was like, okay, this is common across all, well, not all, but it's common across property managers. They hate this problem.
They hate what? What's the problem as they described it to you?
Property inspections. So at the moment, they organize a schedule with Outlook or a physical calendar. Then they print off a checklist. Then they navigate their route for the day. So they've got 5 properties to inspect. They've got to work out the best way around town.
You mean like using Google Maps, they plot them all on there and they figure out what's the most efficient way to go do this, okay?
Yeah, then they drive there, and then they go through the property, and they check everything off. Then they have a digital camera too, and they take photos of the house or the property, and then they collect all of that stuff, and then at the end of the day they drive back to the office, put their notes there, plug their digital camera into their computer, upload all the photos to their computer, then work out what photos are from what property, what photos in each property relate to what room. Then they open up Microsoft Word, put their header and footer in there, and then start to type up the reports, like one by one. And then they, what Word's like, trying to format a photo and get it positioned right, and then they have to send the reports to the owners. So that's the process. And I'm pretty sure even if you're not a property manager, you can tell that sucks.
Yeah, now that you describe it, absolutely. And then the report that they send over is probably going to look pretty ugly, stretched kind of every time someone tries to resize in Word. It feels to me, at least non-techies, feels to me like they forget that if you make it wider, you should also make it taller. Keep the aspect ratio the same, or else the place looks weird. So I don't know if they have those problems, but they have problems like that as they're putting it in Word. And that's why that sentence that I read in the intro, it even automatically creates beautiful inspection reports with one click. That's why that's so significant.
Yeah.
That your software does that. Okay, so I see now how you can see their pain and their frustration in that, and how you can say to yourself, software would work to make that simpler. So is the next thing you do, as I understand from your conversation with Jeremy, our producer, is you diagram the solution for them. So now that you
Yeah.
understood the problem and step by step and you had a vision for what you could do, how did you diagram it?
So, I had this problem, and it reminds me when you're on the phone, I wasn't just looking for any problem. I was kind of angling towards problems that could be solved with software, because that was what I wanted out of the call. So, come here, I found a problem that could potentially be solved with software. I didn't know anything about software, but I could kind of imagine how you could have an app that you could do the photos and the checking off with. Um, and to be honest, I didn't even know if it was possible to build it, but I drew it anyway. I got out some paper and I started drawing like how it would work. And I just kept drawing until I found something that would solve the problem. Um, and then when I had it all drawn up, I was like, I I called the customer. Well, they weren't customers. I called the people back, and said, like, and it was a series of calling and sending emails with these like ugly sketches of a could be software product, attached, and getting feedback. And at first they were like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa!" Like, you know, it would have to do this, and here comes your product from the mouth of the customer. That's when you're building something good, when they're actually telling you that you've got it wrong and it needs to do this. So I let them sort of do that, being careful, of course, not to let it, a lot of what they drew on there I just
What's
binned.
one thing that they told you about the product when they saw the sketch that you wouldn't have known without them? How did they help shape it? Do you have a specific?
um Specific. um
Here's one that I've got from your conversation with Jeremy. They didn't want to have to type a lot on their phones. They wanted autocomplete insert. So you said, "Oh, I can give you autocomplete, so you don't have to do much typing." Is that a good example?
Yeah, so you got it. They said, I would hate to have to type in, my all these comments with my thumb. I hate texting, and that would suck. And that's what they told me. I came up with the auto text thing based on the problem that they told me to solve that. So I think again, it's important not to let your customers tell you the feature, but more to tell you the problem with it at the moment, and then work out how to solve that. Because if you give them reins of your product, I did give them reins of it for a while, and it just started to become like a spaceship, and I had to start ripping stuff away, and I realized that I was making that classic mistake of just letting them do whatever they wanted. Yeah. But lucky it was only on paper at the time.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. So you're showing them sketches. They're giving you a little bit of feedback on features that they need or on solutions that they need. You're improving the sketches. You finally get them to say, "This is exactly what I need. I want this." At that point, do you say, "Would you pay?"
Uh, well, not right. I didn't at that point. And I definitely didn't say it like that. I said, I just kept going back and forth. And remember, at this point in time, like, I'd actually met up with these people for coffee and stuff. Like, there was a good relationship there, um, and the communications had included, meeting up, calling, and email. And And so it got to a point where they were like, yes, this, I want this, this would do it. And I was like, awesome, finally I've got that. So I went away and worked out, how much I'd have to charge for it to make a good business for myself out of it. And it sounds kind of selfish, but like if this is going to be what you do, you've got to make sure that it can make enough money to satisfy you.
So how much money did you estimate that it would cost to build it?
Um,
And I know things change as you build out, but what was the original estimate?
so the original estimate was $6,000.
Okay. And how many customers would you need to close to earn 6,000?
Probably like I had 12, and so I don't know, probably like 15.
Oh, 15 you'd need to close to get to $6,000?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And
And
that
so
would cover the whole development cost, right?
mhm.
But that's not what you're trying to do here. You're not trying to cover your whole development cost. That's not the reason why you work out your pricing and you come back to them is because that's what that's what you're going to have to sell it for to make a profit in the long run. It's not as short term as I just need to cover my development costs. So I didn't mind putting in my own money to get it developed, provided that all I was testing was, would people pay for this?
I see. And then
And that's the most important thing. You can have everything else, but if someone won't pull out their credit card and give you the money, then ditch it. Like,
I see.
you need the money, yeah.
And so at what point did you get them to pay you? Did you get them to pay before you built it?
Yeah.
You
So
did.
I again, it's very tempting, just like human nature, to think, okay, I'll just go build it, and then when I've got it and it's all shiny, I can then get someone to pay for it.
It's
But
hard to get somebody to pay for something you haven't built yet.
it's surprisingly not that
It's
hard.
not.
No.
So how did you do it?
So I went back and said, this is the pricing that I'm thinking about charging for this. And I had worked it out, just the tiers, again, printed on paper, nothing fancy. And they sort of looked at it and they were like, yeah, like yes, it looks fine. Like, they weren't ecstatic about it, but like there wasn't any major objections with it. And I said, basically, I'm going to have to dedicate a lot of my time to get this product built. I'm going to have to invest a lot of my own money in it. And it's going to be a massive thing for me. So, I need to make, I need to have some sort of cash flow from this to make it all work. So this is the pricing I'm thinking. And they looked at it, they said, yeah, looks fine. And I said, so, I'm willing to offer you 10% off for life, and I will never change the pricing on you. I will always leave it at what's on this paper, minus 10%. If you join now, basically, and pay 3 months in advance, and yeah, like, surprising, but not so surprising now when you think back. But yeah, people took it.
So they
They
paid.
were like, yeah,
All right.
yeah, and human nature would mean before you asked for that, you'd need a payment system, right? Or a business bank account or something to accept credit cards. Well,
Right.
shit, I didn't have any of that. I had. They said, can you send me through the paperwork? And I was like, shit, I don't have any paperwork. At that point, I didn't even have a domain name, and this product didn't have a name. Remember, it was just a drawing. Um, no name, no logo, nothing. And I mean, I had no paperwork. I just gave them my personal account number, um, which was like a tertiary account. And I was just like, this is my account number. Can you just put the money in and just use this reference? And people were like, yeah, sure. And paid the money. And then I was like, okay, I've probably got I've got the solid foundations for something here.
Um, I imagine at this point people must be thinking, that sounds outrageous. You just give them the account number and money comes. What's Andrew trying to sell? But I've got to tell you, when you're thinking of a business expense, this how much were you charging a month?
Like 150, I think.
$150.
Yeah.
It's nothing compared to some of the problems that we deal with and some of the expenses that we deal with. Hell, Amazon S3, just to host some of our video files on Mixergy must cost over 600 a month. That's like a
Wow.
nothing part of the business that's invisible to the audience. I remember someone called me up, an entrepreneur, and he said, I've got this solution to a problem that you posted online. If I create it, I sent him money before he even had a chance to really describe the solution. I just PayPal'd it over to him. It was $100 or so. It's nothing when you consider that it's a business problem, and businesses have huge expenses. And if you can freaking solve one of our big problems, we're going to have a lot of revenue or a big reduction in our expenses as a result of it.
All about the pain.
Right. If it's a huge enough pain.
Yeah, someone doesn't care if the product is on paper without a name, a domain, anything, and you give them your personal account number. If it's that, all the other stuff, all the things that entrepreneurs obsess about, like polish and getting everything right, like none of that stuff matters. When you get the actual basics right, you can get away with the scrappiest of all things if you just get the basics right.
And yet, it wasn't enough for you. You knew their problem. They were willing to pay. You still, because of your feelings about the past failure, said, I'm not yet on solid ground. And you decided to do one other thing. What's that? To confirm that you were going to build something that would actually produce revenue.
Yeah, so I'm really glad I did this, and I would do this again, because in my mind I was sort of thinking, I built a really good relationship with these people, and they kind of they designed it with me. It could have felt like their baby, because it was something that they had their hands on, and I was like, sure, I closed the deal, but is this going to work with other people? Because they're not going to have their hands in the product, and they're not going to have this sort of relationship with me. So I thought, well, there's only one way, and I was like, I've got to try and sell this thing, to someone I've got no relationship with. And so I just found some phone numbers, and pretty much I just called someone and said, my name's Sam. I've got a new, it's kind of lying, but I literally pitched it like I had it ready to go. And I saw what happened, and we'd have a conversation, and I got the same objections I get today. The sales conversation goes exactly the same, and having that conversation, you can have that conversation before you have the product, and it's like, this is the most important thing I reckon in the world, and it needs to be so clear, is when I started my first company, I did everything and then talked to a customer. Um, but really, you can have the exact same conversation at the very beginning.
And
You can.
before you even build it, do you tell them I'm about to build it, or did you say I've got this product?
I said I had it.
You
Like
said you
well,
have
I
it.
didn't say I had it. I said we've basically got this new product that does, you know.
Got it.
Then when I actually got towards the end of the call and people were like, "Yeah, let's let's do it. Like this sounds really good." And they asked how much it cost, everything, and they were happy with it. Not as easy as that. There was actually some salesmanship involved, um, and and then I had to say that well, I didn't have it was I said it was in development and it was due to be released at this time. Um, and they said, they're like kind of like, oh, you you pitched me it and it's not even built. And I made them the same offer.
He said, when I build it, I'll give you 10% off if you buy it now.
Yeah,
And they said, yes, some of them did.
yeah, not all, but a good a good percentage, enough for me to think like now I had the exact sales conversation. The
What are
real
the
object
objections that you said that they brought up?
um what's a typical thing? I don't have enough time to to implement something like this.
And what's your answer to that?
Um, Back then it wasn't as good as it is now. But back then I was kind of like, well, are you sure? Like the whole benefit you're going to get from this product is saving a whole lot of time. Like, tell me what you're working on at the moment. And they were like, we're trying to get this done, trying to set up this new office. And I'm like, okay. So if you rolled this out, like, it would probably take a day to implement and then it's going to save you this much time. You're going to get these things done faster, and like just basically trying to do that. And um,
All right, I get what you're saying. At this point now, you understand what their concerns are. You have answers for how to counter their concerns. You're always going to have objections. There's never going to be a perfect product where people say, "Yeah, I'm jumping in." Your goal is to come up with responses that explain your product better and assuage their worries. But you
yeah, and
found something that
to
worked.
have,
It was time to develop. I want to get to a couple of other things. When you developed it, to show the developers, use Kenotopia, which is a design product that makes it easy for non-designers to design what they want, especially for mobile devices. But what's more important, looking at my notes here, is the oh, you talk to high-end developers, but you wanted to hire, excuse me, but you wanted to hire cheaper developers. I see the big smile. Tell the audience what your process was and why you did that.
um, uh, no offense to the developers that are listening to this, but I went to a really good, like a top of the line sort of software company in my own country, and showed them what I needed built. And they because we're both in the same country, English is our proper language, and they're very smart and they know exactly how to do it. And they put together the whole feature list, the whole proposal for something like this. Exactly how it would need to be built.
They
What
said,
was
if you
required.
hire us, this is what it'll look like. These are the features we'll build in. This is how I see your eyes are lighting up as I say it. Okay. And what'd you do with that proposal?
So that proposal came back, and that was 110 grand.
$110,000 to build this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I pretty much used that proposal to send to development companies in India, and say, without the price on it, of course, and say, hey, I need to get this done. This is one proposal. What can you give me a quote on it? And let everyone fight for it. Pretty much just price shopping, and got it down to the cheapest one, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And that's how you had to build. All right. I don't want to get too much into that because that's a whole other conversation in itself. And frankly, we have programs on how to find developers and how to work
Yeah.
with them and get the product built. What I think was especially unique about your business is the way that you figured out what the business should be. And already this business is more successful than your last one. Speaking of your last one, I want to come back to that now that we understand this process. If you would have done this process all over for your previous business, what's one mistake that you made that you think customers would have quickly shot you down for? What's one big mistake that you didn't notice back then?
Cut. This is my first ever business, right?
The $10,000 loss business, the one that was
Yeah.
a big pain.
Well, I never really had any customers. Like, um, what do you mean?
What I mean is, I guess you did talk to customers after you launched it. When you
Hmm.
talked to customers, what did they tell you was bad, was dopey, was a mistake about your business? What did they tell you they didn't like that you could have heard beforehand and avoided?
Oh, so just the fact that they didn't really need it. Um,
That's a good point. It's not necessarily any one feature. It's just, hey, we don't really
yeah,
need this. This doesn't solve a problem for us.
exactly. It's not about features or anything. That was the truth. They just didn't need it. Like, it wasn't high on their priority list at all. Like, to be honest, the thought wasn't even really in their mind. There was no desire for it. There was no need. There was definitely no pain. Like, it was just, it was a nothing.
All right. That's a good place to leave it. A before and after right there if I ever saw one. If people want, first of all, if they want to follow up with you and they want to say thank you, where's a good place for them to go?
Um, just, I don't know, just in the comments, or they can send me an email. Um,
What's your email
and
address?
Sam at samovens.com.
Sam at samovens.com. And of course, I always urge entrepreneurs, to talk to past guests so that they could get to know them, so that maybe, first of all, just because it's a nice thing to do, but also because we need these relationships as entrepreneurs. I talk to Dane every once in a while to just help him think through my ideas. I remember the first call that I made to him where we talked about some random thing, and then through the conversation, I opened up about this observation about find the pain as this big thing that I've noticed in interviews, and having a conversation with him helped me. So it helps us, I think, as entrepreneurs to have other people who get our space and get our world to help us think through our ideas and to clarify them. Dane also has a group that you are a part of. If someone else wants to join the group, do you know where they go for that?
Yeah. So it's the foundation.io.
Yeah, I'm looking actually right now on my iPad. Yes, thefoundation.io. And oh, look at this. He's got my photo up on the page. Of course, I gave him a testimonial. Dane's incredibly helpful. All right, so thefoundation.io. If anyone else wants to be a part of this, Dane's the guy who's your mentor, who helped walk you through this process. Are you still able to talk to Dane now
Yeah.
that you're done?
Yeah, so we're good friends now.
Okay. Yeah, done, I should say, with the program. He's got this program where he walks entrepreneurs through this process where he introduces them to each other, where he helps them and they help each other out. So how, if you had an issue with him today, like, I don't know, that Andrew really ripped me a new one in the interview, could you email him? How would you contact him?
I could just give him a call.
You've got his phone now. You've got his cell
Yeah.
phone, and you would just call him up and say, Dane, I've
Yeah.
got this problem with Andrew, or Dane, I need to find more customers, and he'd talk to you and help you out with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't get a commission, by the way, from talking about this. You don't get a commission for talking about it, but Dane's a good friend who's helped us out, and so I want to say, I keep looking at the iPad just to make sure that the top level domain is right, that it's thefoundation.io, not dot something else. So it's thefoundation.io. All right, Sam. Thank you for doing this interview.
No problem.
Cool.
Thanks.
How many interviews, by the way, have you watched? Mixergy interviews.
I couldn't give you a number, but I'd say more than 100.
100. And you've heard me in the past say, after you build your business, come back here and teach others.
Yeah.
How's it feel now that you have that opportunity to come here? And I think you did a great job helping other entrepreneurs understand this process. But how did it feel from your point of view?
Just weird being on the other side of like, because I've seen your face and I've heard your voice and I've seen those books in the background so many times that I never imagined being the dude, you know, on the other side of the computer. So it's a bit weird. But no, I feel good.
Well, thank you for doing this. And I'll say the same thing to the audience. Use what you've learned in this interview and other interviews, build up that business, and then I hope that you'll come back here and do an interview with me where you get to be as useful for other entrepreneurs as you've noticed Sam be here today. So thank you all for being a part of Mixergy.